fall spring
Oh, here she is.
morning.
Yes.
We're getting close, starting to get warm. Once again, my name is John O'Bell. I am your facilitator for this. And with that, I'd love to kick it over to Frank Green, our Deputy Program Administrator, to open up some remarks.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining. Greg Johnson couldn't be here today. He's out of town, but asked me to fill in for him. I want to thank City of Portland for hosting us and wanted to give. Sorry, you're just coming in. Don't mean to, but give DCA Donna Paul an opportunity maybe to give a welcoming. And thank you for hosting us.
Absolutely. My name is Priya Dhanapal, and I use Sheila pronouns. I'm the Deputy Administrator for City of Portland, and I oversee 3 bureaus, including PBOT, and welcome everybody here to the partnership and collaboration on this very important program.
Thank you. I probably should have mentioned Frank Green, Assistant Program Administrator. But I'd also welcome Mayor Ann McNary Ogle to give some welcoming comments if she'd like to.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. Good morning, everyone. Happy Fool's Spring. The snow is coming next week. Don't put your tomato plants out. Let's get this benefits advisory group meeting going and get this wrapped up.
Thank you. Looking forward to the conversation. John Anthony.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and kick off with some housekeeping items. If you can go to the next slide, please. Just a reminder, we do have our material available today. This meeting, closed captions in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate front. Just a reminder as to how you can access closed captions. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a menu of options. You can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. A square CC icon towards the right side of the menu, the toggle captions on. Click the sub menu arrow to access more settings, including language, font color, and font size. In the effort to continue this interaction, there is an ASL interpreter in addition to closed captioning. Make sure the interpreter is always visible. Please right-click their video and select Spotlight Video. Those watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. Still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see them. From our City of Portland colleagues, if there's any safety procedures we should be aware
of? The stairs are, if you go that way, there's just stairs right down to the main one.
Thank you. Next slide. Just a reminder of our group agreements. It's for us to continue to put relationships first, to keep focus on our common goal. For us always to notice the power dynamics in the room, for us to create a space for multiple truths and norms. Be kind and be brave. Practice examining racially biased systems and processes. That this is a learning space for everyone, that we always tend to look for learning. Advisory group members will turn on cameras to the degree that you're able, so that we can all be in this shared space together. Please take care of your personal needs as they come up. Please just let me know if you do need to step away. We want to make sure that we get your input. Virtual participants can participate by taking written notes and using the raised hand feature, as well as a speak feature for active engagement. We always strive to welcome diverse perspectives. It's okay to disagree. For us to remember to move up. And for us to assume and have good intentions. Next slide, please. Already done our welcome, but Emily, I'm going to kick it over to you to have you kick off with our virtual members.
Sounds good. All right, if we could please go to the next slide. All right, so if I could please ask our virtual CBAG members to raise your hand so that we can call on you to introduce yourself. And we ask that you please share your name, your organizational affiliation or at-large status, your pronouns if you'd like. And then our check-in question is, what's the best thing about where you grew up? So if we could pull our slides down and I can get us started. Hi, everyone. Emily Thomas-Prata. I'm on the IBR equity team, community benefits lead. And the best part of where I grew up in Redding, California. So that's up north. And it's just a lot of really beautiful nature. There's 2 lakes on kind of different sides of town. And some of my best memories growing up are going there to the little local spots. So yeah. And then I will go to Janie and Ryan.
Janie Haygood, Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission Chair, and she, her pronouns. The best thing about where I grew up was it was this tiny town in southern Idaho. My dad was the city attorney. My mom was a school teacher. Everybody knew everything about everyone, which was a wonderful thing. But it was also a horrible thing. So it kind of had 2 double-edged sword there, but in most cases, it was a wonderful thing.
Thanks, Janie. We'll go to Ryan and then Peter.
I'm Ryan Winsheimer. I'm the ODOT Region 1 manager. That was a very interesting introduction about knowing everything about everyone. My wife grew up in a small town, and I think she only remembers the negative component of that, but I can imagine the positives of that as well. I grew up in the Portland metro area, actually out by in Beaverton by Oak Hills Elementary. So for those of you who are locals, that's where I grew up. It looked very different back then. The things that I really liked about it was kind of on the edge of the urban area. So we had the forests we could go play in and go explore and have fun and feel like it was an adventure. But we also had the amenities of a large city nearby, the Portland Trailblazers, and other things that we could go experience. So it was kind of the best of both worlds.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan. We'll go to Peter and then Farley.
Good morning. I'm Peter Fells. I'm representing ACE, which is the Alliance for Community Engagement, a coalition of environmental groups in Southwest Washington. I grew up actually in West Los Angeles, but the best part about where I grew up wasn't so much the place as the time, because I grew up in the 50s and it was safe. We could leave the house, me and other neighborhood kids, roam around in the summertime or on weekends, be gone all day and just have to be home by dinner time. And I don't think my parents worried about it. So that was nice.
Thanks, Peter. We'll go to Farley and then Juan.
Good morning, everybody. Farley Winters. I'm an architect at LSW Architects in downtown Vancouver and a neighborhood or resident of the Arnada neighborhood. Favorite thing or best thing about where I grew up in West Seattle. And I have to say the views of Puget Sound and time on the water are like top of my experience. I think it's hard to ever beat the view of Puget Sound from West Seattle.
Thank you. Lon and then Darcy.
All right. Lon Placon, he, him pronouns. I'm the city manager in the city of Vancouver. Grew up in a small town in Western Iowa, and I'd say that the greatest things were like those 4 perfect days between like Fool's Spring and False Autumn.
Thank you. We'll go to Darcy and then Scott.
Morning, everyone. My name is Darcy Hoffman, she, her pronouns. I'm with Workforce Southwest Washington. Like others on the call, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in a little tiny town outside of Forest Grove, Oregon. And everything about it was amazing. It was beautiful. Just a great place to be a kid. I don't think I would want to be an adult there, but a great place to grow up.
Thank you. We'll go to Scott and then Anthony.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott McCullum, he, him pronouns. I'm the superintendent of the Washington State School for the Blind. I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I think my favorite things were The lakes, there were lakes everywhere. We spent lots of time on them in the summer and the winter. But as a hockey player, every neighborhood where I grew up had its own hockey rink, outdoor hockey rink. So I got to skate every day, and I love that and miss that dearly.
Thank you. Go to Anthony and then Michael.
Hey everyone, good morning. Anthony Samperio, he, him pronouns, and I'm with Work Systems. I grew up in Long Beach, California, and I think the best part about growing up there is just the proximity to like the ocean where you can get in the water. I kind of miss that a lot. I miss the beaches compared to the coast here in Oregon. Good to be here.
Thank you. Go to Michael and then Serena.
Right there with Anthony, Michael Strauss with Kimco Realty, representing the Jansen Beach Center for our tenants and as well as the retail and other businesses on Hayden Island. He, him pronouns. I grew up in Irvine, California, not too far from where Anthony grew up. The beach was awesome, but I'm going to go with the best part being the proximity to Disneyland, which we got to go to all the time as a kid. Thanks.
Like to see lots of my fellow Californians here. Serena and then Holly.
I'm Serena Stoudemire Wesley, Assistant Director for ODOT, Equity and Civil Rights, and I grew up in the beautiful Portland, Oregon. And it was a small town back then because we walked everywhere and did everything. And it was inner northeast, so we could do the Lloyd Center, we could go up to Jansen Beach, and everything was cool and it was safe. And you can be gone all day long and nobody cared.
Thank you. And we'll go to Holly.
Well, hello, Holly Williams, community member from Vancouver. Kind of a hard question because I went to 9 schools, K through 12, but I think probably the most impactful and in many ways fun was my 4 years going to school in the city of Baltimore and just walking and riding the city bus everywhere and having that independence and meeting lots of different people. It was definitely a great part of my life.
Thanks so much, Holly. And we'll turn it back to you, John, for the in the room.
Great, thank you, Emily. We'll start off with Corky.
Well, where I grew up was had stifling weather, was isolated from the rest of the world, had limited opportunities, poor economy, and all my friends just wanted to get out and never look back again. So, but you wanted the good stuff, right? Looking back on it, it's like, don't look back on it, it's like, well, culturally, economically, socially, extreme divergence, which is really a fascinating place to study. I mean, if you wanted to go back and do
Where, Corky? Where?
well, I would prejudice it now if I told you. Mercedes, look it up sometime. But pretty tight.
Hi, Walter Valenta, representing the Bridgeton and East Columbia neighborhoods and Kenton neighborhoods. Well, my dad was in the Air Force, so I moved all around, and we moved a lot of different places. And so only looking back can I sort of see some of the stuff. And so one of the memories that really impactful was in first grade in Alabama during the George Wallace period. And kids there didn't wear shoes to school. So the first day I decided to be like, I didn't know it was because they were poor. I mean, so I decided not to wear shoes to school one day, and that was the picture taking day in the class. So there I am with the big class picture and my little toesies showing. So it was really interesting. Well, looking back, you just see how different all the different places that we lived were, but that was really extreme living in Alabama during segregation and how poor some places were. So, thank you.
Tom Hickey, North Portland Neighborhoods and on the Community Advisory Group. Born in Oregon, but I really grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And I will say that the best part about that is unlimited free museums. Smithsonian Institution is one of the most incredible places in the world. If you ever get a chance to go there, you could spend months and not get bored.
Carly Francis, Washington State Department of Transportation, and the Southwest Region Administrator, she, her pronouns. I'm a split between Eugene and Portland growing up. So Parks in Eugene, that was great. And also the Slug Princess and the Slug Parade that they would have to memorialize the weather. So that's sort of a stands out. Memory.
Frank Green, Assistant Program Administrator, grew up in Butte, Montana. So a lot of people might think proximity to like Yellowstone or Glacier might be interesting, but having been there like every year for the first 20 years of my life, loses its luster a little bit. But I'd probably say I really did like the winters, mostly because that's the only season that you had. So you have to like winter, but they were, there's something about the winters there that I really still remember growing up with.
And McInerney Ogle, Mayor for the city of Vancouver, Eugene. And so walk, ride your bike, lots of water, Willamette, Slough, Fern Ridge Lake, and oh yeah, University Board.
Catherine Kelly, City of Vancouver, she, her pronouns. I grew up in South Minneapolis, and I would say, similar to Scott, the lakes were amazing, but also, maybe surprisingly, the diversity in the demographics.
Good morning, everyone. John O'Bell, co-facilitator of CBAG. I grew up in Portland, and as I think about what's so unique about our city and our region is proximity to nature. You're an hour and a half away to the Pacific Ocean. You're close to the gorge. It's just a really unique place. It's fortunate to grow up here.
Priya Dhanapal, City of Portland, and I grew up in a city in South India called Coimbatore, and it has a population of about 3,600,000 square miles radius. So Coimbatore was known for being very idyllic. It has 70-degree weather most of the year. It was a perfect, like kind of similar to Portland, natural beauty, access to beaches are not so far away, and it's very beautiful. And also, it was a perfect blend of, my favorite part about it is it's a perfect blend of industry and livability. It had the world-class healthcare, education systems, and also was known as the industrial hub of South India, but it was a mix of both ends. And it was also known for its sweet water. The water tasted, they claim it's the best sweet tasting water in the world. And it does taste very good. More than anything, the people are very warm and welcoming, and it's known for the hospitality throughout India.
Wonderful. Now we want to go. Brendan Torres Saragusa. I'm on the equity team here to support the meeting today. Grew up in New York, in the New York City area, Brooklyn, Long Island, North Jersey. Just the proximity to the arts, the culture, the music, the theater. So I miss that the most, and always look for that.
Eric Trinh, I'm also with the equity team. I grew in Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City, some people call it. It's such a big cultural hub in Vietnam. Something that I always remember is people there never drink hot coffee because it's always 100 degrees outside with 200% humidity, not exaggerating.
Dr. Todd, use he, him pronouns. I'm also on the equity team. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, which if you asked anybody was like, don't go there, it's unsafe. The nuns would tell us when we were selling candy door to door. So you're from Glen Park, which was a neighborhood in Gary. But honestly, the thing that I remember most about Gary was the community. We could go into any house on the block, borrow sugar. My mom was known to like give kids baths. Like we all knew each other, and just, communities that have been disinvested in and have been ignored by local systems develop mutual aid. And that's what I love about Gary, is the community.
Hi, everyone. Brenda Martin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the project manager from the city of Portland for IVR. And I grew up in San Diego, California. I think what I remember the most, or maybe I just miss it the most, is Mexican food. Just the proximity to really good Mexican food, and mostly my mom's cooking, but also just any good taco shop.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Rada, she, her pronouns. I am on IBR as transit design lead. I also work for TriMet. I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. Yes, it is the paradise that everyone thinks it is. blue skies, sunny days all year round, almost all year round. I miss some great things about Hawaii are the greenery and the tropical plants and the life. But I think for me, the thing that transcends everything is the spirit of aloha and the idea of family, and that, you know, we're a tiny island in the middle of the ocean. And so that idea of family is very strong, that we're in it together. And I feel that way about IBR.
Last one here. Okay. My name is Prashant Kulkarni. I'm the principal project manager with design, working for TriMet, working on IBR program as well. Born in India, grew up in Mumbai, a city with lots of colors, hustle and bustle. Some fun facts: it's a 233 square miles area with 53,000 people per square mile. So you can imagine it's lots and lots of people, but awesome food. And what fascinates me is how city functions. The urban infrastructure is phenomenal. So if anybody ever wants to go and visit Mumbai, please contact me.
Sounds like you got a contingent going. Okay.
Sorry, Jonah, we've had a couple other folks join here online. I just wanted to give them an opportunity. Marcus, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we were doing our typical introduction, and then the prompt was, what's your favorite thing about where you grew up?
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Marcus Mundy. He, him, his pronouns. I'm with the Coalition of Communities of Color. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and it had everything. But what I remember vividly was summertime, the beaches. We would live at the beach and go to the beach, and our water off our coast you could actually swim in without a wetsuit or a dry suit or something like that. It was warm. So I do miss that a lot, and the fact that people would actually drive fast on the freeways. You can't do that in LA anymore, but back then you could actually drive fast on the freeway and get around town. So thanks for the opportunity. You all take care.
Thank you. And then Aiden, love you to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for being a little late. Aiden Gronauer, they, them, or he, him pronouns, Assistant Director of Civil Rights and Equity for the IBR. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, so I do miss a lot of things about Memphis, but one of the things that's popping into my mind are lightning bugs. And crickets. We don't tend to have those out here. And I have some, I see Marcus is laughing. I have some really good childhood memories of just going out and, trying to catch those beautiful light up bugs that flew around the skies. That is one of the things that I miss.
Great, thank you. If we could get the slides back up, we'll go through our agenda.
Oh, sorry, last one, Jonah. We have last one, we have Vicky here. And then that's
I'm sorry, my internet went down. I just got back on. So I'm Vicky Nakashima. I use she, her pronouns. I represent the Equity Advisory Committee for IBR, and I'm a resident of East Vancouver. I grew up and was born in Spokane, Washington. And I miss getting to ice skate on a frozen lake.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Jonah.
Okay. All right, if we can get the agenda up quickly and then we'll receive public comment. Here in a moment, we'll receive CBAG public comment. I do want to note that in your agenda package, you did receive, I believe, 3 written public comment. We'll receive a program update from Administrator Frank Green. Then we'll roll up our sleeves and continue conversations relative to Tranche 4. You'll recall that this is a continuation of the tranche that we had a discussion on at our last meeting. So we'll wrap up that. Then we'll have a close in the next steps. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just a reminder for those wishing to make a verbal public comment, you may dial 669-900-6833 or 408-638-0968. Want to enter meeting ID number 864-4769-1084 and passcode 503-85815. Please remember to dial *9 to raise your hand. I will call on participants to provide comment. Please do remember also to dial *6 to unmute yourself. Please provide your name and affiliation. We will attempt to at least have 10 minutes for public comment if we need it. If we run out of time and you have not had a chance to speak, you can still provide comments after the meeting. Next slide, please. If you'd like to submit advisory group comments after the meeting, fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CBAG Public Comment in the subject line. Please also dial 360-859-0494 for our Washingtonians, 503-897-9218 for Oregonians. May also use our toll-free number, 1-888-503-6735. Please also state CBAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CBAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CBAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment?
No one at this time.
Okay. Please do let me know if that changes. With that, we'll turn it over to Frank Green for a program update.
Thank you, Jonelle. I'll try to keep this a little bit brief. If you can go to the next slide. Want to recognize since our last meeting, the northbound span turned 108 years old on Valentine's Day. So we like to acknowledge its birthday every year, recognizing that, obviously it was built at a time when, some of the types of transportation and understanding of what would happen potentially like in a seismic event weren't really, I think, forefront on minds when it was constructed. But we do like to celebrate the northbound span when it turns, when it has its birthday, and we know the southbound bridge is a little bit younger, but it's still only about 50 years younger. So wanted to just highlight a couple of the recent activities and events that the program's been to. We've been going to a lot of the city councils around kind of the Southwest Washington area. Kansas City Council, Washingtonville, Battleground, the La Center, as well as speaking at the Clark County Council. Really wanting to make sure that we're answering questions as they're trying to work through some resolutions that are coming at the C-Train board, and think that those have been good opportunities to get some additional facts out to those kind of outlying and Southwest Washington cities. We also have had a number of conferences or presentations and panels that we've participated in the last month. You can see some of them listed here with the Western Federal Lands Conference, the Southwest Washington Contractors Association. Really wanted to just highlight that we're still, even though we're after the draft SEIS timeframe, we're still trying to get out there and make sure that if people want to know what the program's doing and what they can do to ensure their voice is heard as we continue to move forward, that engagement will still continue to happen. It wasn't just the comment period and then that was the only opportunity. We're going to continue to do these throughout the program's development. Maybe one more thing that's not highlighted here is, obviously the team is still working pretty hard to put together the responses that we got or comments that we got during the draft SEIS. There was, certain number of submissions. It was in the 3,000 plus amount of submissions that equated to just under 10,000 actual comments. And so the team is sorting those, putting light comments together, working with our federal partners, coordinating with them very closely to really be working on developing those responses. That's a big amount of comments and we have to respond to each one, and we have to do that in coordination with our federal partners. So a lot of work going on there, and the goal is really still to move forward with our final SEIS and get to the record of decisions so that we can kind of transition to kind of from the environmental planning stage to a little bit of that delivery stage. So with that, I'll open it up for if there's any questions or if anything was missed.
Well, what's up with the vote on canvas and light rail, and how are you guys interpreting that process, that political thing?
So good question. Right now, there's a resolution at the C-Tran board to go. I'll pause for a second. In November, there was a resolution that was adopted at the C-Tran board to modify some of the language that C-Tran had put in one of their conditions for the modified LPA approval. And that change in language changed from language that said C-Tran, will not participate in essence in transit operations maintenance to may. So really, I think just opened up some of the options that the Southwest Washington partners could use to identify how transit O&M could be funded, what sources it may come from. The presentations that were going back around is there was a resolution that was bought to revert that language when the board makeup changed a little bit at C-Tran. They'll be hearing that at their March meeting. And so we've been getting to all those boards and councils that have members who sit on the C-Tran board. Washougal, I think, took an extra action rather than just to give their counselors kind of direction on how they should vote to the resolution. They took the extra step of saying, as a kind of an outlying city, they don't support light rail. But that doesn't necessarily come back to C-Tran unless there's a resolution brought up at C-Tran. So we're doing our best, like I said, to make sure that they're informed of what the program's doing and what it means to, replacement of the bridge and how this is a really truly multimodal solution. And that's what the region agreed to. So, I guess from that standpoint, it's what the Washougal City Council felt compelled to do for their action. But it doesn't necessarily come back unless C-Tran brings up a resolution at their. Yep. If you want to add anything.
No, right now it's 9 members on the C-Tran board. 4 of those votes come from small cities, 3 of which have identified that light rail doesn't benefit them, so they don't want to support it.
Questions online? Okay. Emily,
I have a question. So what does that mean going forward by not having those 3 cities supporting it?
That right now, as Frank pointed out, on March 11th, the small cities will bring an action to the C-Tran board asking to revert back to the old language. The old language was if C-Tran were asked to participate in the funding of light rail, they would pull all of their support for the bridge. We will look at what comes forward on March 11th and handle it one way or another, and we'll let you know at the next March CBAG meeting.
Thank you.
okay, Emily, we're going to kick it over to you to give us a preview as to what we will be working on today.
All right, sounds great. All right, so we will be working today to wrap up the refinement of our Tranche 4 recommendations. So our last batch here, just take a moment. Thank you everybody for working with us to get to this point. It's been a lot of really great work and excited to get everything wrapped up here. Before we dive into part 2 of Tranche 4, the recommendations we'll be refining today, I wanted to just take a moment to reflect back some of the updates that we made to part 1 of Tranche 4 based on the discussion that we had last month. I'll read through the updates. You'll note them in your chart that has all of the all recommendations chart. We can have more discussion about them in our next session when we go into the decision making, because we want to make sure we have enough time in today's meeting to get through part 2. So if there's something you heard that maybe we need a little more discussion on, if we can hold that to the next meeting, that would be really great. But we wanted to make sure we do our loop back here and share what we've updated based on your feedback. So from MA 17, there was we made an update to the language so that there could be a more clear distinction between experts versus community representatives. As you'll recall, this one is speaking to making sure that we're incorporating feedback from these groups around the impacts. And so we made that language update. We added language to reflect going beyond minimum ADA standards. And we also included language around making sure that the engagement includes communities of lower income and communities of color. For mobility and accessibility number 18, we updated language so that there was a switch from post-implementation to post-construction for clarity. Again, this is based on the discussion. And then we also added language about re-engagement and circling back with individuals with disabilities and underserved communities. And for mobility and accessibility number 25, we had, it was referring to signage around the multimodal paths, safety metrics. We had discussed how this could potentially fit into one of our other existing recommendations. And so we included it there. That really talks about wayfinding and signage, and we made sure that this language was incorporated into that one. And then for physical design number 14, this one was referring to securing buy-in on design aesthetics, and the original language was around elected officials. Folks discussed that this should be expanded a bit more, so we updated the language so that it could be referring more to community stakeholders. And then we added this to our existing recommendation that focused on design and accountability for design consistency of standards. And then the next that we updated was physical design 16. And so there was language about signage for native plants near the waterfront. And so what we did is we expanded this to include language around ecosystem health, cultural heritage, and considerations for long-term maintenance, again, based on the things that we heard from all of you. And then finally, for physical design 19, this was around the ecosystem considerations for the lighting. And so we included language for considerations around mitigation of impacts on migratory birds and other wildlife. So we just wanted to reflect that. We heard all of your feedback. We've made these updates, and you'll see that reflected in your charts here. So with that, I'll ask Fabian to pull up our chart for part 2 so we can dive in for today. All right, thank you very much. So the first that we will cover is physical design number 20, and this reads install. Oh, sorry.
Fabian, can we make that just a little bit larger? I mean, we all have this sheet, but just in case folks want to use screen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right. So this reads install well-designed concealable garbage cans to maintain the bridge's cleanliness and aesthetic appeal. And so this, a little bit of feedback that we had gotten in discussion from our technical teams is that typically trash cans are part of standards that are included for light rail stations. However, outside of the transit stations, this would need to fall similar to the bathrooms to the local jurisdiction and partners. And then another piece here was that there was in mobility and accessibility number 15, it talks a lot about considering maintenance, active management, and future proofing for the multi-use paths. And so we wanted to propose potentially including this into that recommendation, making sure that we have language that includes cleanliness, since it's all kind of talking about the same idea and in the spirit of trying to consolidate where we can, where it makes sense. So with that, I will open it up for a discussion.
Thoughts on PD 20, and sounds like a proposal to consolidate that with an already existing. Okay.
Who cleans the bridge?
What part of the bridge?
Do you sweep it? Who sweeps it?
Yeah, the roadway would be maintained by, we're still determining the DOTs. You know, right now ODOT is the lead for maintaining the existing. We'll have the intergovernmental agreement that's going to talk about who would be the actual agency maintaining it, but it would be the combination of the two DOTs would be doing like sweeping on the roadways and
How about the sidewalks, bike lanes?
the active transportation.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting space though of dialogue about tools to do sweeping of more constrained spaces, which I would say is a growth area. I mean, Ryan Wincheimer can speak up as well, but sweeping of pathways is just a different can of worms.
Right.
And so that's, it's not necessarily something that is bread and butter. I know. Right.
But it's going to be very wide. Gravel is going to kick up on it, everything else.
So I guess the idea of, I imagine it is physically separated, the pathway will be physically separated from the lanes in such a way that the idea of sanding of the roadway would not transfer.
Okay.
Lofting trash, which of course occurs, certainly could end up there. So I think that that idea of gravel is probably a little less likely unless we were actively sanding the active transportation pathway. And I would be curious about Ryan's commentary on behalf of ODOT and differences of capacity to manage pathway type facilities versus just existing capacity to do that. Because I think that's for us, I know it's a growth area.
Because when it says local jurisdictions, I don't see the city of Portland and the city of Vancouver emptying garbage cans and painting out graffiti on the bridge.
I think this is probably highlighting that trash cans we might be looking to locate trash cans in a place where they could be serviced by a local agency. I think that's what folks are implying here, and maybe Emily, you have more conversations on this, but we are often not placing like the distance of the pathway and whether or not there's a need sort of, I don't anticipate a trash can in the middle of the bridge.
Okay.
And so I think that space would probably be a partnership activity. The sweeping and other activities, certainly painting out graffiti is our responsibility and is subject to available funding and staff time to do so, which I know we have a rich history of talking about.
A rich history.
If everybody can read between the lines on that one. It's challenging to keep up with at times.
Absolutely. Yeah. But the city of Vancouver and I, the freeway and the bridge have never been the responsibility of the city of Vancouver now. So I don't see local jurisdictions as being the new partner in that process.
I think the item, so this is a question about condensing these things together. I think trash cans, I think we would be seeing whether or not we could place them in a place where it is naturally easy for other trash cans that maybe the city services that are proximate to the pathway, whether or not we could place it in a place where the city could partner on trash can emptying and maintenance. Other components. So if condensing this creates a challenge of clarity between parties who might do the work, then that argues against condensing. I think the trash can stuff is probably something we'd be looking for partnership on. The other pieces are sort of more naturally our typical responsibility.
So maybe it's the word bridge, because it would probably not actually be the bridge. It could be in the project area.
And city, I mean, it's similar to like the land bridge or the bridges that you have that are city streets that go over I-5 and the sort of relationship of responsibility there. I do want to pause, and maybe Ryan Wincheimer doesn't want to say anything, but I don't know, Ryan, if you want to correct anything about what I'm saying, or
Ryan, then Walker, and then Corky.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Carly said is because generally that's true. This being a tolled facility, we're actively having conversations with IBR and with WashDOT, and you know, as we continue to develop the toll project, you know, if this is going to be a tolled facility, what level of service are we providing, and what are people willing to pay for? You know, is this something that people are willing to pay an additional amount of money to have a higher level of service for those things? So, you know, generally, this is something that it's not a very it can't be a very high priority because we don't have the staff to do a lot of those types of things. But it is, as Carly also said, a growing area where we're trying to figure out how to do better, and how to be better and how to provide that higher level of service. So those are things that we're looking at. In terms of trash cans, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like the sweeping or blowing of the pathway on the structure itself, and how we would try to figure out a way to provide a better level of service than we do today.
And I would just interject one item around the idea of tolling, paying for those things. There is a necessary tie for tolling to pay for maintenance and operational things, which from a bonding perspective, which serve to allow the facility to be available for revenue collection. And so this is an interesting space where Ryan is suggesting there's possible additional, question and space for other things that might not be about the revenue flow. The easiest conversation within toll borrowing to have is to say, we're going to fit these things in because they support the facility being able to be a revenue collector. Other things outside of that are less clear to borrowers about how and why you might incorporate those and maybe set into, if they are deemed to be sort of fundable through that source in the long run, the question is like, how do they sit alongside those things that allow it to be revenue generated? Just be very plain about how the framework for a toll facility and how operations and maintenance is seen on it. There's one component that is of necessity to even lenders to know that we're doing what we can to make sure the facility is able to churn money, basically. And then there's other stuff, and that would probably be a side conversation as opposed to a central conversation. Just to be very plain.
Yeah, I really appreciate some of the feedback here, and Mayor, to address some of what your suggestions were around, maybe removing the word bridge. This is part of why I wanted to suggest us potentially including this with Mobility and Accessibility 15, because that language is consider maintenance, safety, active management, and future-proofing in the design aspects of the multi-use path throughout the program area. And so it seems that we could add something like cleanliness to that as well, so that it does cover this piece around, the maintenance of it, but then doesn't kind of get too specific on the bridge and is more broader to the program area, like you had suggested.
Emily, the reason I say this is because we often get weekly emails and phone calls from individuals about litter and garbage on WashDOT property, and people think it's the city of Vancouver's responsibility, even though it's WashDOT. It's at the bottom of the priority list, and there are no funds to have a consistent cleanup of that area within the bridge influence area. So adding this plus the aesthetic appeal means not just on top, but underneath. And I'm thinking about the pillars underneath that will be a graffiti magnet, and who will be responsible for that. So that memorandum of understanding of the whole cleanliness and aesthetic appeal of everything within the BIA of this is going to be especially important to Vancouver and the city of Portland, and who's going to be paying for that.
Walter and then okay.
Right, just to weigh in a little bit, right now there's a problem with glass on the bike system. So irrespective of garbage, garbage in dirt or sand is one thing. Glass, your tire gets punctured. And there has to be a way that these trails are regularly swept for glass, even if it's just the glass, because it already is a very bad problem on the existing ones. And if we have even a more elaborate system, and that glass isn't coming from somebody throwing it out of the car. It's coming from somebody riding their bike or walking with a juice bottle or something and dropping it, even accidentally. And so, one glass shard sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks on it, and our amazing number of flat tires on bikes. So somehow we have to figure out a way to constantly do that. And I don't know if that, on one hand, it could be an ODOT sweeping or WashDOT sweeping, but maybe there needs to be just a way to say, hey, there's glass here, some technique that glass can get picked up, because sometimes it's just one little pile of glass, But, you know, lots of people are riding through there and don't pay attention, and now they have a flat tire. Now they're walking their bike across the bridge.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from the outside, and I respect Carly, Ryan's, concerns, Mary Ann's points. But from the outside looking, in fact, it reminds me, when in college, I rode my bike everywhere. I was a big bicycle rider. But on one short bicycle trip, I had to fix 3 flat tires because of glass inside, so I went out and bought a car. Seriously, it's like, I'm done with this. We're trying to bring people onto the bridge, active train station, bicyclists, pedestrians, so forth. So we need garbage cans. Why are we even talking about it? I mean, it should be a strong point in here for community benefit. Should be garbage cans, cleanliness. I'm not sure. I'm suggesting maybe the responsible party should be the 2 dots in coordination with local jurisdictions. It seems that that's dot property, right? So I would suggest maybe that change. But really, the details are really, really important here, obviously, and very difficult. We can't solve those in this committee. All we can do in this committee is say, solve those. I'm sorry, but really, those need to be solved. Any questions?
Mr. Gunkel.
This is a good discussion. I'll keep my comments short. Definitely engaging with the jurisdictions, including City of Portland, for services, the government's collecting services will need to be important. I want to clarify, what is not the collecting agency for Portland. It's a different service areas. We will need to engage with them for discussing partnership opportunities. One thing that I did want to point out was, in addition to garbage cans, I was wondering if we could consider recycling cans as well for cleanliness.
Sorry, could you repeat that last bit, please?
Recycling bins in addition to garbage cans.
Other thoughts on PD cleaning? You guys gotta stop talking trash in this room. Dad joke is okay, for someone with no kids, it's not dad jokes. Explain that. Emily, was there any more context from our technical teams with respect to this particular one that you wanted to highlight?
I think really the piece around that the trash cans are part, from what I understand, of the standards for the transit stations themselves. So that would be included at those locations on the bridge. But yes, the outside of that on the trails would be a different piece for the maintenance.
Tom?
I just wanted to point out that the transit stations are inaccessible to people on the public bike path. They're specifically designed so that they are not directly linked. So that the location of trash cans at the transit stations is of no value to people using the multimodal path.
So now, well, what if, right? I try to think outside of the box at times. So here's a what if. What if the region coordinates with local community groups, right? And have trash pickups. Or I've seen on certain roadways, adopt a roadway, right? So perhaps, I don't know whose responsibility would be, but there could be some coordination to address trash and whatnot along, I'll say, the active transportation pathway. Because I don't see this as Frank's Bridge or Udon's Bridge, or, this is our bridge. This is the region's bridge. That's the what if.
But
we do adopt a highway as a strong tool. It's actually it can be a pretty flexible tool. And to the mayor's comments about the pillars underneath, it makes me think about some of the painting and development work that is being funded by community groups on the Evergreen overpass. Whether or not there are opportunities for that sort of muraling and responsibility sharing. And so we do use that in different places. And I think about the community effort that I every once in a while see along the pathway along whatever Portland Highway along, that crosses from Columbia out to Marine Drive, and that pathway, when it's got that wagging hump in it that drives you bananas when you go over it. Not that I've ever ridden it. And then also that there's just, it is a place where there's a lot of gravel on that path at times in certain places and glass and whatever. And every once in a while, somebody's just fed up with it and they get out there with the broom, which is not the best solution. And so it is so just to note that I think part of what Ryan and I are trying to own here is we know we have challenges right now with showing up in the ways that we would like to. And we want to own that here to be this, it's a problem. And we may continue to have a problem with that. And it is important. And adopted highways are really there's some ways in which, especially if it's not having people on the active right of way, like the freeway right of way, because you want to have safety protocols there. It's an incredibly flexible tool, and there might be ways to consider whether or not there's sort of shiny or signage or something like that, so that the pathway across the river might be adopted by somebody and could sort of have that sponsorship recognized in a particular way, so that some companies it's my pathway right now. Maybe something like that in a more formal way would provide the ability for folks to demonstrate stewardship and get a little bit of traction wherever they are out of it as well.
But Carly, we also testified on that $1.6 billion bonding for the state of Washington on the tolling, and it was clearly for maintenance and operation of this system. So as I'm looking at it, it makes sense we have that conversation that this is part of the maintenance and operation of the system, and it is part of that tolling. So that tolling, even if it's half of 1%, is dedicated to the maintenance and operation of this system. And that's the garbage, the sweeping of the sidewalk is going to be a different machine than the sweeping of the concrete roadway and such. But I think we actually need to put that in writing and have a serious conversation about that.
Okay, let's keep moving. Emily, CB6.
All right, thank you.
Just a note for our members, we're capturing the notes and thoughts. You'll see that reflected in our next meeting when we vote. CB6.
Thank you. All right. And so Fabian, if you could please pull up our chart here. Awesome. Okay, and so our next one reads, provide online access to 3D models of the program to aid in visual understanding of design. And so some note here is that this was done for the SEIS public comment period. There were flyover videos that were included on the website. Folks in the community gave really great feedback around being able to see those. And our team has shared that there is likely going to be something similar that will be created for the preferred alternative after the record of decision. So open this up for any comments or discussion.
Hearing none, seeing none. Oh, yes, Peter.
Oh, Peter, you're on mute.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that my comment on this after seeing the flyaway, what they're called, fly-through visuals, they were not provided for the active transportation paths. And in viewing the presentations, I found it really hard to figure out where those paths went and what the conditions were. So I'm hoping that when the next time around, we do it not just for the car transportation, but for the active transportation as well.
Thanks, Peter. We can make a note of that.
All right.
All right, if we could pull back up the chart, please. Great. Okay, CB7. And before I jump into these, I think just going a bit off of a little bit of our last conversation, I just wanted to note that, it was a really great discussion, and it's great for us to be talking about some of the considerations for implementation. And for these ones in particular, just want to note that we understand that some of the recommendations that you put forward are going to fall outside of what, DOTs are able to do, and that some of it is going to require some of that, partnership with other partners, jurisdictions, look for opportunities for funding or joining into maybe existing development efforts. So I just want to note that even though, there may be pieces around implementation that isn't quite figured out yet, we still want to hear from you all on what you would like to see. And then that next step is part of the work with partners and with others to figure out how we can possibly make these happen. And so just wanted to set that kind of framing here for when we dive into these last ones, because these are the ones that really kind of fall into that category here. And so the CB7 is coordinate with local governments to address zoning code issues that hinder housing development and housing affordability clauses, particularly in home ownership opportunities to address gentrification and displacement. And we had one that was that really we felt fit well with this. And so it's what you see in the italics below that we added in here to explore land and zoning swap strategies for freeway adjacent land in collaboration with housing authorities to develop affordable housing located further from freeways and dispersed on both sides of the river. And so just some notes here that, again, even if this is something that the DOTs are not able to do directly, we still want to hear these recommendations from you all, and that this could be shared with those other partners who, ultimately would be responsible or would be part of the effort to implement these. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Start off with Corky.
So, if you can help clarify this for me, we're talking about land in the construction zones, if you will, near the highway that is currently residential, and then basically swapping that with another area to make that residential so that the land next to the highway becomes something else. What I couldn't understand.
Emily, could you?
Yeah, and this language came from all of you. So if it's something that we would like to adjust, or if it's something that we want to change, the spirit of it, we can certainly do that. But we're reflecting back what we heard from all of you on really the desire to develop affordable housing, but that maybe not adjacent to the freeway might not be desirable because of different, considerations or concerns there.
I'm wondering, do we have residential area adjacent to the freeway now that we need to swap? Is that the idea?
I think that was what the language is really proposing, that if that does exist, that's a possible option for, creating these new opportunities or finding more zones for residential housing.
I feel like the spirit of CB 7, 8, 12, and 13 are all sort of trying to express the idea that the bridge and its environment and its development is going to have an impact on the land around it, and that we want to have the bridge be an active partner in making sure that the development that is not the bridge's responsibility, but the housing developments and the neighborhoods around the bridge are encouraged to develop, and I think we'd like to see development. There's the whole Jansen Beach area that would love to be developed in a hearty way, I think. But we want to see all that done in a thoughtful manner, and we don't want IBR to ignore the thoughtful things that have to happen to make the communities adjacent to IBR develop in a smart way. I personally think that all four of these items are sort of drilling down on specifics that are outside the bridge's purview, but I think that those are topics that need to be carried in mind. Perhaps, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel like there should be a development committee that forms that the bridge is a participant in, and maybe even a leader in, but it is not a director of. That IBR should be attending and commenting and doing, influencing the work, the ongoing work over the next. Well, IBR won't necessarily be here for 100 years, but the development of those adjacent areas is important to the community. And the thoughtfulness of that development is important to the community. I don't think these specific points are things that the bridge can do much about, other than to help maybe establish a committee or provide meeting space or that sort of thing, and bring together a citizens committee to talk about this stuff long term. But I don't know that it's upon us right here today to speak to exactly what that development should look like.
I think just to extend this, there's this interesting space. I think about where folks are asking me to navigate houselessness or other things that are very much things that we are host to. But ultimately, I think there's an expression of values here that I don't think you want the transportation agencies to own or dictate, because this is an expression of community values. And so I think you're making a distinction that's really helpful. And the idea of trying to be a partner to support these things and to be a good partner with local jurisdictions to seek these outcomes, or community groups to seek these outcomes, is relevant. And we don't always have a lot of great opportunities, but we try to be receptive to those questions when they come across and to be partners in it. But I think part of what you're hitting on is this is an expression of values that the communities should own and not IBR, because we're the transportation guys. And there's a way in which that's maybe catalytic as an investment, but also we're not the arbiters of community values and the expression of them and how to achieve those activities. And I think what you're saying partially is you don't want us to be, and I think that's probably fair.
I agree.
Yeah.
Peter. And then I'm going to turn it for you to Matt, virtual.
Okay, I wanted to comment that at one point we discussed the problem which Carly just raised, that the construction is going to displace houseless people who are currently tenting or residing in the DOT right away, and we need to figure out, is a community benefit to try to help relocate those people. I didn't see that in the other branches. I don't know what happened to that idea, but the CBA came up with regard to, there was some discussion about creating some affordable housing, and yet I think we all agreed that affordable housing right next to the freeway is not very healthy. So the idea was, if it does turn out that as a result of construction, we have some land that becomes available that might be used for something, that we don't use that for housing, but we try to swap that land with a commercial or industrial user who might have some housing zoned land elsewhere. So that's sort of how this all came about, and I think it is to some extent an IBR responsibility, because of the fact that we're going to be just displacing people who are using the DOT land for housing right now.
I guess I just would add on this idea of, I'm sorry if I've been interjecting, I apologize. So yes, I think there's a rich history, and at some point it may be useful to bring down some folks and talk with Ryan and others about work we've done around houselessness on other large projects. We obviously partner with local jurisdictions to support and navigate displacement when it is sort of necessary for safety reasons or others. I think the idea of the land swap, I guess the mechanics behind that generally would be, so as a jurisdiction, if we are selling land, abutters usually get right of first refusal on that. And then the jurisdiction in which that land sits gets another sort of like has the opportunity to maybe say we would like to buy that. And then it can get out into sort of the auction space. And so again, there's a space where that my gut would be if there was a developable parcel, something that's material next to the freeway. Again, I don't think you want DOT actually doing the development of affordable housing. I think that's just not our bag. And I don't want my highway holders doing that. I don't think you do either. But there's a space for sort of setting an expectation that if there is developable land, we do follow those processes. So abutters get that first right. The local jurisdiction can get that. That actually facilitates a greater opportunity for swap because the city actually owns some parcels around. And we have satellite parcels that are odd times, but WashDOT is actually trying to dispense of them anyway. Most of our stuff is right by the highway, but that swap actually I think gets facilitated by way of property disposal to possibly local jurisdiction who could then do that swap. So important to catalog here and recognize that that's sort of the mechanic backdrop of how that stuff flows and likely how that kind of concept might come to fruition.
Carly, is that the same in Oregon?
So Brian could speak to that, I would assume. I don't have that awareness of Oregon stuff. Did you hear the question, Ryan? Do you want us to repeat it? Okay, so the question is, how does property disposal work for ODOT? Within WashDOT, Washington State, abutters have first right of refusal to purchase a property. We have the opportunity to give the jurisdiction in which the land resides an opportunity to purchase in advance of it going out to general sale. Is that the same disposal process that exists or sort of hierarchy of priority that exists within Oregon?
Yeah, ours, I don't think ours has the same in terms of it being within the jurisdiction that it is, so much as that public entities have first right of refusal. So it is public entities though that goes before it goes to the public. So it could be any public entity. And I'm not sure the ranking order in terms of if two cities, for example, wanted it. But to me, it would obviously, if like the city or the county wanted it and it was within those areas, they would have the first right.
And Ryan actually that may be exactly how it is in Washington, right? But there's a jurisdictional opportunity in advance of general population.
We've got a hand up here online, Shivani.
Hi, good morning, folks. Thank you. I think the concept of housing, where you put housing in relation to the bridge, I think just the way that the suggestion is written in italics, I just want to be cognizant. I agree there are definitely some environmental concerns around putting housing next to the freeway. And there are also accessibility concerns if we only build as a community, only build affordable housing located further from the freeway. And so there has to be a lot of work done to really intentionally ensure that if we are building affordable housing far from the freeway, that we're increasing accessibility to public transit. A lot of times folks who are in low-income housing are really automobile dependent. And so if we're thinking about trying to mitigate the environmental impacts of being near the freeway and we move folks away from the freeway and then they're still auto dependent, then what have we actually done, excuse me, to improve the environmental quality of the area? So it's always a push and pull. And I think that there's not really, inevitably somebody is upset and there's maybe not necessarily a 100% right or wrong way to do that. But I do think that as it's written, it's important to note a need for equitable transit-oriented development, to develop affordable housing located further from freeways with increased access to public transit. I think would be useful. And it's important. I've said this before. In fact, I think I maybe say it every month. The IBR team has done a phenomenal job of really trying to be as equitable as possible and trying to implement equitable policies and good intentions. We know where good intentions take us, right? And so it's so important to be very clear in the language and to cement the commitment to equitable development in the language of the plans, even when it feels redundant. Then lastly, I just want to comment on the points that were made just a moment ago. And again, I'm assuming good intentions. I don't think that this, I don't think that there was ill intent or malintent in the comments made, but I think that it's really, really important to consider when talking about whose responsibility it is, what entity's responsibility is it to ensure let's just say respect or to ensure care for displaced communities, given that the historical context of the interstate and freeway system in this country. We had better be darn sure that we understand who we're talking about displacing when we're talking about building highways and building interstates and building bridges. And so while I agree that transit should not be building housing, I agree with that. And that's not the case. Transit's not building housing and should not be doing that. Transit absolutely needs to be considering and coordinating very, very intentionally with the public entities through which they are developing transit so that we don't continue to displace marginalized communities at the risk of those communities to benefit to benefit a quote unquote broader public. So I would really, I think that these goals are really tricky because it does raise the question of whose responsibility is this? And I think it's easy to say, well, that's not my department. That's not my responsibility. But in all actuality, the community benefits agreement function is to remind a community that community is everyone's responsibility. And so we do have to think as an entire whole, how are we transferring land? How are we swapping land? How are we building? How are we creating a space where everyone can feel included and be successful, where everyone has access to public transit, where everyone has access to fast transit, where everyone has access to clean air. So I think that's just important to name, especially given, this is just our second meeting of the new year. And obviously the public tone towards equity has changed substantially, but there are people and organizations at this table that are deeply committed to equity, and that commitment is not going to waver regardless of any public political changes. And so I would just like to invite us to continue to remind ourselves why we're at this table to begin with. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael?
I'm a little lost as to, we've kind of gone off on what feels like a little bit of a tangent, and I'm not sure exactly which of the reference numbers, which of the comments that we're addressing, but I do tend to think that despite the noble goals of encouraging, very legitimate community development goals here, it feels like we're starting to get a little out of scope from the transportation, especially when we're referencing some private properties that are adjacent, that are near the bridge process. But when we start talking about repurposing and and exploring opportunities on private land, it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable for some of the private property owners nearby. Just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And I think that this really kind of raises a question, and the whole discussion so far around this raises a question in that, is there a way that we would like to maybe shift how we're framing this? Since, again, we've all kind of highlighted that this is outside of the scope of the IBR program, but that doesn't mean that we want the ideas or these values that we've been talking about to get lost. So is there a way that we reframe this to, maybe a more overarching recommendation that talks about the way that the IBR program could, support or share these values, or, leverage, some of the development efforts and that support of the local, jurisdictions, partners who already have their own efforts, their development plans, their investments that they're working on around development. Do we reframe this in more of a within what IBR can do, but still keeping that spirit behind what folks are wanting to see? I see Shabana here.
1 second, Josh, if you're coming.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on both Carly and Tom's points, and I think for recommendations CB 7, 8, 12, and 13, I think you're right on, Emily. I think these are acknowledging the catalytic power of the IBR investment that our community is making, but are outside of the scope of the DOTs. And so each of these could have language that would say, to the greatest extent possible, IBR program leadership, however you want to name it, will support local government and community efforts to achieve these goals. Not saying DOTs are responsible for this, but DOTs acknowledge that this bridge has a role to play in transforming the areas around the program area. And I think each of these are kind of talking about, issues that have been really important to community members that are outside of the scope, but we don't want to just say, well, that's outside the scope. I think you could name in each of these that there's a role for IBR program leadership to play in supporting these efforts, highlighting them, championing them, but not being in charge of them. That keeps them in the conversation as we move post-construction.
Yeah, this is more direct to the city of Portland. In the past, how the city of Portland would look at this would be that the Hayden Island, Bridgeton, Kenton area would all be looked at in a master plan, how to use the catalytic interests of this new project, whether light rail or all that, and they would coordinate with planning, PBOT, and particularly Prosper Portland in an urban renewal district, and actually mastermind facilitating these things, respecting the private property, but trying to bring value to the private property, because that's how the urban renewal district funds itself. And this is exactly what happened in the Pearl District. It's exactly why we have South Waterfront District. It's what they're trying to do in the Rose Quarter District, where that's an urban renewal district, an urban planning district built around the changes because of the freeway. Very controversial, that one. I don't know if it's going to be as controversial up here, because Hayden Island is ripe over the next 20, 30 years to be quite an interesting place. And then what would usually happen is that this urban renewal district would facilitate that, make low-income housing goals, make people money, do that. Bridgeton was developed to an urban renewal district. We were through the yellow line that did light rail. Vancouver, Williams Corridor, where all those new buildings are, that's all City of Portland urban renewal coordinated planning effort. So back when we first started IBR, there was discussion of having that planning effort happen, but that was before the city changed. So I'm sort of wondering, in the new city organization, is there still a plan to do a unifying update of the existing neighborhood plans? Because Hayden Island's plan is not viable anymore. And are they still looking at it in the way of leveraging urban renewal? I mean, everything's changing so much in the city of Portland. I don't know if their philosophy is the same as when they were creating things like the Pearl District. But that's the sort of effort that we need up here. So I want to just suggest to the city of Portland people, as we go through this over the next few years, but this doesn't have to happen tomorrow, that we figure out how to seize the catalytic conditions of this bridge, so that then look at on Hayden Island, Grant Pier is right across the river from Hayden Island. Look at what they did with their waterfront. on Hayden Island, we have very low intensity usage that now has a brand new freeway. So if they really want to have a grocery store and they really want to have all these other amenities, there's things that Portland has done in the past to facilitate that through the open market. So I'm hoping that as the city gets their handle on the new way that we're organizing thing, that we can make sure that that planning effort does happen for that area. And also, I don't know if there's any updates on that, if it's languishing now, because there was some specific ideas a few years ago, and I don't know if those are just lying fallow or if there is actually still effort to try to bring about that planning effort. And that takes it off the IBR. It's not their job. They're just a partner in a city-run process to do that. And Vancouver, I know you're doing similar things to make sure you're leveraging the cap and all the stuff around there. You have your own way that you make sure that's going to integrate into the downtown master plan from how Portland does it. But, you know, it's really the city's job to make sure that that's all happening, leveraging what the changes are here. So is there any update from the city of Portland on those ideas?
I'm gonna check in with my staff on this. Do you have any
Sure. I think that the city is in support of exploring these. I think ultimately, though, it's definitely a regional response, and we would want to work much closely with Prosper Portland. It's, you know, much more their expertise. So I think the city is certainly open to having those conversations, but I think that it would require, you know, agencies that aren't in the room right now, and being able to explore that, and making sure that it does meet with our kind of desired regional goals of where we want housing and kind of the opportunities that exist around the region.
Emily, and then we'll go to Porky.
Yeah, I just wanted to, as part of kind of trying to wrap up this conversation around this, I would like to propose, you know, if we could reframe these recommendations again to reflect some of these pieces we've been talking about. So language around the IBR program, you know, to the greatest extent possible, supporting local efforts, local jurisdictions around these pieces related to affordable housing development, community development. And so that way we can reflect the values and some of the pieces that we see here. We can list out some of these important priorities, but, you know, keep it in this kind of functional language where it's really capturing the spirit of what we're discussing here, where it's the program is supporting these local efforts. So I'd like to propose that shift here.
Thank you, Emily. Porky.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of alignment here. Josh, right? Quirky. Josh's comments I thought were brilliant because I was thinking the same thing. You know, it does make sense to take 7, 8, 12, and 13, combine that into one, and use Josh's language. You know, strongly support. I forgot what it was. You know, and report out on local jurisdiction. You know, to use IBR to facilitate perhaps or encourage local jurisdiction exploration of land and zoning swaps. Potentially including community centers, you know, and bullet these out, you know, work with program partners to support mobile homes, explore opportunities to build a grocery store, and create a master plan, which is something you said we can explore it. We've been exploring this for 15 years. Yeah, on Hayden Island, you know, it's about time probably to do that, you know. So can we do that all in one and start with Josh's language and bullet that, point out the others? Does that make sense?
Let's go to Frank and then Mary Ann, but let's come back to that as a possibility.
I was gonna just go a little bit different route, and so my thing I felt compelled to say is I don't want the I want expectations set a little bit. There's not going to be a tremendous amount of developable property remnant after the program. I just want to make sure that folks here are recognizing, you know, it's we're going to purchase the right of way necessarily to build the program, and a lot of the right of way we are purchasing, you know, there may be some, you know, strip areas here and there that aren't necessarily used, the bridge or bridge pier or touchdown, but I felt compelled. I think we've said that in the past. I know this came up with maybe some of the green spaces and parks and things under the bridges. So just, I kind of felt that nudge from, you know, Greg's not here, but I felt they needed to put that fact on the table is, you know, we're not going to purchase more right away than we need to build a facility in there. That word developable that someone said might be an important word here, because what is developable, what is a remnant that's left that could be developable would be an important thing to understand.
All right.
And to understand it, let's get it right. Understand what Ryan and Carly talked about as a process. So when that question comes up, what about this sliver of land? What happens to it after everything is built? Who has first right, second right, I would like to add one thing underneath it. There's discussion about the floating homes. What well, wherever it is, we have floating homes in the slough, and we're building a bridge over the slough. They're not going to be able to stay there during the construction. Where are they going to go? Because Oregon doesn't have a bunch of open slips nearby that they can just plug and play. That conversation needs to happen so those individuals can take their home and move it somewhere during construction. After construction, do they get to come back? Where would they go? And I guess as we were talking about other homes, mobile homes and affordable housing, we have, is it 27 floating homes or more that need to be addressed somehow? They're in Portland city limits, I think.
It's something like that, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask, there's a proposal on the table to do some consolidation. Porky, maybe you can recapture that.
Sure. Use Josh's language to start off saying, you know, how we're going to strongly support and report out on efforts to have local jurisdictions, and then bullet point each of these, explore land zoning swaps, potentially include, et cetera, and also add in master plan for 8-9.
Well, for the entire region.
For the harbor area. For the harbor area. Yeah. Obviously, IBR can't do the master plan, you know, but let's take advantage of the fact that we've got a really great group of people, you know, let's get them together and say, hey, city, you need to start doing a master plan. So
Expressing the values of and the will of this group relative to the jurisdictions. Okay, are folks okay with that?
Yeah.
Any objections? Okay, so at our next meeting, you'll see reflected an attempt to do exactly that prior to the actual vote. So we'll get working on the wordsmithing relative to that. And that leaves us, which ones does that leave us?
CB11.
CB11.
Yes.
How about, and we're consolidating time.
All right.
Are you gonna edit your amendment?
No. Separate.
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Similar to CB11, talking about East Delta Park. That whole area is very, very complicated. We've known this from CRC days to now, and I don't want to get into design of it, but it does. I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to make a recommendation that IBR staff work with affected residents and businesses and Delta Park to better design the East Side Marine Drive interchange. There's some real good opportunities there, and it might be in the purview of this committee to encourage staff to take advantage of some of those opportunities, because it's a mess. It's a problem. It's a complicated interchange. It's a problem for residents, a problem for businesses, a problem for freight movement. It's an impact to Delta Park, and we can perhaps encourage staff to,
You're talking specifically CB11.
Yeah, and I would, along with that, I would say potential funding is PBOT, ODOT, LIDs, the heavy vehicle use tax.
And Emily, could you give us an overview on CB11 as we open that one up for further discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So the language on CB11 is clean up the contaminated areas at the East Delta Dog Park between MLK and North Union Court to ensure it can be used year round.
And commentary from our technical teams.
This was one that, since it's kind of a maintenance piece that this would likely need some coordination with our local jurisdictions on this. It seems like it's an ongoing maintenance question in terms of the park's upkeep.
You know,
Yeah,
well, that's happened already. So right now, that dog park has had 3-4 feet of fill put in. So it's not a marsh. So that's actively being built right now by somebody in the city of Portland. So this is good news.
so ready reporting CB11 is done.
It might be done in like, I mean,
Power of this group already. Someone has heard.
so, you know, it became a big homeless camp and it was really marshy and muddy. And I don't know exactly, you know, it hasn't reopened as a dog park yet, but it's been filled with quite a bit of fill raised up. It's not, and so I don't know the background. I just drive by it enough to know that it's being constructed right now.
I just wanted to sort of second Corky to suggest that CB11 is, and if it's being taken care of, great. It's a small piece of a larger issue. And the larger issue being that whole NLK interchange exit, and what happens there with the neighborhoods and the freight and all that sort of stuff. We have been, as North Portland representatives to the IBR, we've been pushing this whole time for a reconsideration of the way the interchange is currently designed or was presented at the SEIS. And we have, as part of our SEIS response, submitted a whole bunch of proposed other ideas that we would like to see taken under consideration. So what I see as an important thing that I would like to see personally, you know, speaking from the Bridgeton neighborhood point of view, is that package, that interchange, be a subject of ongoing conversation. And that's what's important. The dog park is an element within that, but it is not the whole conversation by any stretch of the imagination. So if that work is done, we could strike CB11, but I wouldn't like to completely lose the community benefit of drilling down on how that interchange can function best for the community
And the free community.
and the freight community. Yeah, well, I mean, in the entirety of the local usage, because we think that design as presented is not optimal, and that there are smart things that can be done that would be beneficial to everybody. And so that's what I'd like to see CB11 say.
Any thoughts online for campus? Oh, yeah, directly.
We wanted to, I think we need some internal coordination to do because we would like to know what kind of contamination was there and who determined the contamination. So this information on that will be helpful. So we can coordinate internally to see which bureau is addressing it and how, but we would definitely like to work.
Yeah, I think definitely around, I think to Walter's part is the contamination, the mud and the muckiness, is it the kind of, you know, vehicles and uses along the park? So the contamination is just unclear kind of what they meant here.
Does
Does
anyone recall, I don't know who was the author of that, and this is a reflection of this body. Where's the contamination is coming in?
It was my understanding that the dog park had been, that Parks and Recreation placed the dog park off limits during the winter because the waters muddied the land, and that there were some heavy metals that were brought to the surface through use. So that was only allowed to be used during dry season. So it was soil contamination of some sort or other. And then when the homeless camp moved in there, they were living in the rain amongst these contaminated soils.
And adding their own contamination.
Yeah, and adding their own contamination. So I think 3 or 4 feet of topsoil is probably best practices for solving that, unless you're gonna haul it all away and incinerate it or something.
Emily, and then we'll go to Corky.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, maybe this is one then, since it seems like there still needs to be a little bit of information about kind of what the contamination is or what the current efforts are. So maybe this is one that we also kind of just add a little bit of an adjustment to the language where it's, coordinate with, the local jurisdictions to ensure something along those lines. So again, it's making sure that whoever is responsible for that this effort's happening. But again, this is outside of the IBO program specifically as far as the responsibility from what it seems. And so we make that adjustment on coordination to make sure that effort's happening. And then just another note on the piece around the interchange. I understand that since that has been submitted as a public comment, I know that means that the program is going to officially respond to that, consider that and everything. That does feel like one that is quite a bit different than I understand the connectedness and I definitely appreciate that, but that is a large scale design piece rather than this specific issue we're talking about here for the park. So I would suggest that we focus this one, keep this focused on the park, understanding this coordination around the cleanup effort, and while the program addresses the bigger design question through that public comment response.
Great, thank you, Emily. Corky.
So regarding the bigger issue there, it's up to everybody whether you want to do that or not. I would encourage you to, because it really speaks to the heart of community benefits. And this is not just the residential community nearby, it's also the businesses. It's the park itself, the way the roadway design could either impact the park more or less. And that's important for people using the park. So it really is a community benefits thing. And everybody should know too, that I don't think we're really talking about arguments over which design. We ran into the same issue and resolved it with CRC as well. The problem is this whole mass of roads coming together on the east side of the Marine Drive interchange really creates a mess, but it's not right at the interchange. So from a federal design perspective, from a federal funding perspective, it's like, well, it's a little too far away, but federal guidelines allow that, in extenuating circumstances such as this one. So they allow IBR to look at that whole mess there, because it's very directly impacted by the interchange itself. So that's why I was bringing it up, is saying that I think what we would be doing is helping encourage staff to break out of their constraints and say, you can look at this a little bit more holistically from a community benefits perspective, and we encourage you to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if the group wants to bring that forward as a recommendation, I think Emily kind of covered it, that we are aware, that it's a public comment. I know we've had conversations with the city of Portland about it. Right now I completely understand, the bringing that recommendation forward. It is, how far outside of the investments that we're making do we keep, running that? Is that IVR, or is that, a future conversation that just needs to be had as well, either as part of IVR or, depending on when IVR would be building that location. So I think we'll definitely address it, in the comments. We'll keep having the conversation about, what can be done there with this program and what might be set up for future needs if there's something there.
Tom?
Yeah, so the main thing I think that the community wants from IVR is to consider how the design of that off-ramp intersects with the adjoining streets and the consequences of that for future City of Portland redesigning of the local roadways. So we understand that IVR is not responsible for like the next thing down the road, but where they place that off-ramp affects how that can be developed later. One of the things specifically is that the off-ramp has been designed to create a four-way intersection with the entrance to Delta Park, rather than, and currently it's offset. And that's done because federal guidelines say, where possible, align your roads. So they did, but Parks and Recreation doesn't want that. They specifically have asked for that to be aligned differently so that the traffic coming off of the freeway is not trying to use the same intersection as the traffic coming in and out of the park. And so that is a very specific consideration, which we have so far not been able to get any movement on. Again, that's got nothing to do with the dog park, but it's across the street from the dog park, and the off-ramp goes through the dog park, actually uses the same land that the dog park is currently on. So when those things get realigned, and they are planning to move the off-ramp from where it is now, when those things get realigned, they will be literally rebuilding the dog park, or at least a portion of it, because they're putting an off-ramp through it and then reestablishing, land where the old ramp was and that sort of thing. So that's where the dog park is directly IBR's problem.
All right. Thank you for that. We've captured the notes. Let's pull up our slides here. Give folks a little foreshadow in terms of what's happening. We can pull up the slides, please. Thank you. Okay, next slide. And just a reminder in terms of where we are, our next meeting, you'll see reflected the changes we discussed today, and then we will begin to vote on your recommendations for tranche 4. We'll continue that in April, and then we'll wrap up our work in May. Have an opportunity to share a little bit in terms of what happens with all of these recommendations within the organization. What are the next steps? We'll have some of that commentary. Then please. Next slide.
Oh, Jonah, we've got a question here online from Holly.
Okay, real quickly, we'll come to the question after we just go through the next slide there. You can go back to the next slide. The next meeting we also have with the executive steering group is on March 6th, 8:30 to 10:30, of course, always available online. Okay.
That time has changed from.
Yeah, we need to update that.
Okay, let's change to 9 to 10. So we'll make sure that we submit updates there. Okay, we'll go to the questions. Emily?
Oh, yes, Holly, go ahead.
Yeah, this is kind of a process question, I guess. About a year ago, I served on a Hood River Bridge Aesthetics Advisory Committee. So it was my understanding that the Hood River Bridge is a little further along in the whole planning process, if you will. And I'm just wondering if there are any plans to have such a group as the IBR process gets further along. And the reason I'm thinking about that is having a recent visit to Arizona, I saw numerous instances of some really awesome concrete art on sound walls and other places.
So that, yeah, sorry, someone's jumped in. So yeah, good question, Holly. I know we've had a lot of discussion, I think, in some of these previous conversations with the CBAG group about, where and when and how I think integration into the aesthetic, treatments and look and feel of this program are going to be, as far as like a specific group that's going to be set up for like an urban, design or bridge type selection. That is not right now, I think, in the plans. We will be looking to develop some architectural guidance and kind of standards for the program to fit within. And then, I think having some public input and groups like maybe this group, if this is still around, when we were able to get those done, depending on what's going on with the recommendations or what the next steps are, be able to provide some input. We have the community advisory group as well that will be making sure some of those architectural and aesthetic kind of documents and frameworks are being discussed at. But so, specific to, I don't know the specifics of the Hood River program, so I don't know what their process was. But I know we will be looking to have input on what the, things like wall treatments and whatnot like that might be, trying to have a consistent look and feel throughout the 5 mile corridor, even though there's multiple construction projects that are going to be building each piece. So that is something the program is working on, and I think Emily or someone may be able to. I know there were some recommendations that I know we're still actively going to be working on from this group about aesthetics and architectural treatments.
Right. There are other questions so line, Emily?
Oh, I'm not seeing any more.
Okay, Frank, will have you share any closing remarks?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I have attended many of these meetings. Usually Greg's sitting here, so I appreciate the discussion that went around the group. Appreciate the city for hosting us, and look forward to our team coming back with a little bit of the changes for some of the comments here, and looking to wrap up, I think, tranche 4 in our next meeting. So I really appreciate the conversation, and once again, everyone's willingness to participate in this group. It's important that we have willing participants for us to be able to get recommendations from the community. So thank you very much for participating.
Great. Thank you all. Enjoy the sun while we have it. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, everybody.
Any day.